Politic. Авторская программа Кирилла Задова, посвященная текущим мировым проблемам. Politic. Предвзятый обзор, субъективные комментарии и искренние оценки Кирилла Задова. С понедельника по четверг с 4 до 5. Politic. Сказал, как обрезал.
Приветствую, друзья, с вами Кирилл Задов, это Politic. Сегодня 14 июля года 2022. Четверг, последний рабочий день этой недели для вашего покорного услуги в этой программе. И сегодняшнюю программу мы посвятим разговору о Ближнем Востоке, естественно. Специальным гостем программы будет профессор Efraim Inbar, президент Иерусалимского института стратегических исследований и профессор Бар-Иланского университета. Это не первый у нас разговор, поэтому, естественно, мы коснемся визита Байдена в регион, в Израиль, после этого в Саудовскую Аравию, перспективы на следующей неделе встречи России, Ирана на высшем уровне и Турции в Тегеране. Поговорим о серьезных ближневосточных проблемах, но я думаю, что всем это будет интересно и полезно услышать мнение профессионала, который занимается вопросами безопасности много-много-много лет. Такой план на сегодня, друзья. Вы можете мне писать 347-460-0877 с вашими комментариями. В следующих уже программах буду отвечать. То же самое касается тех, кто смотрит программу на YouTube в любой точке земного шара. Подписывайтесь при этом на канал. Аудитория растет. Большое спасибо за доверие и добро пожаловать всем новым подписчикам. Друзья, там можно комментировать, я тоже там буду отвечать. Вот такой план на сегодня в прямом эфире. 347-460-0877. Это СМС-портал прямого эфира Нью-Йорк, Майами, Филадельфия, application iHeart, application RUSA Radio везде в нации. Пишите там.
Politic. Сказал, как обрезал.
Welcome on board, Professor. It's a pleasure seeing you, and thank God we have a connection, so we can talk now. I hope that doesn't matter, it's over the phone, still we can see you perfectly well. So through the phone we're gonna hear you, so I think it's gonna be just fine. Good afternoon, probably good evening by you already, it's late. Thank you very much for finding time for us. Obviously, the first question would be about Joseph Biden, the President of the United States, visit to Israel. Right now, I think Israel is completely paralyzed with traffic because of the movement of President escort and cars and security and stuff. Could you tell me, in your personal opinion, what's the main purpose of visit of that president right now in Israel? Considering he's probably very weak here in America, according to ratings, that's falling. And the Prime Minister of Israel right now is a caretaker Prime Minister. It's not the permanent government that's right now in place. So what's the purpose?
Before going to Jeddah, in order to get oil. That's the main purpose of the trip.
Only oil, you're saying, is the main purpose of the trip? Because our press is concerned with the image here at home, because every Israeli visit of a president, any president, is good for ratings usually, because big Israeli lobby and Jewish lobby here in the United States. And also they're saying about something like creating Sunni NATO integration, Israel into region, talk about Iran and stuff, and on the first leg. And the second leg, it's like creating an impression that United States doesn't leave the region. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the point you raised about giving the impression that the United States is not totally pivoting toward China is correct, because the countries in the Middle East are concerned about the departure of the United States. However, the attempt will be doubtfully successful, because as you mentioned already, the image of President Biden is of a weak president, and also on the main issues that is confronting the countries in the Middle East, which is Iran, we all know his position. He wants a deal. When Israel, as well as Saudi Arabia, as well as other Gulf countries, believes that concluding a deal with Iran is a disaster.
That symbolic non-binding agreement that they signed today with Biden and Lapid about not allowing Iran at any price to have a nuclear weapon. What what strength that agreement has, in your opinion?
I think it's a piece of paper, and you can write everything on a piece of paper. the Americans refuse to commit themselves to define a red line in the nuclear program. They also refused to put a deadline on the negotiations. So basically, they continue to try to please the Iranians, and eventually they'll probably sign an agreement. And Israel is very concerned about it.
When you say this, but they cannot, because he said many times, and he said that in interview to Israeli channels before the trip last week, and he also said that already in Ben Gurion of his welcoming speech, that they can, first of all, that they're going to use military force as a last resort, but he said that. Usually it mantra used to be all options are on the table. Now it's a different narrative. It's like we're going to use military force is a last resort option. It's something different already. And also he said that he's not going to remove Islamic Guard Revolutionary Corps, like the most dangerous regiment of Iranian troops or of Iranian military from the terrorist list. He said that. So that's under no circumstances, and that's probably the biggest stumbling block for Iranians to sign any agreement. Or you think Iranians going to sign agreement regardless, just for their oil to be sold freely and easily?
Well, first of all, during the trip, President Biden and his spokesman made it quite clear that they consider only the diplomatic option, and they will continue with diplomatic option at this stage. Whatever it's done on the diplomatic course, the Iranians will not agree to an agreement. They will agree to an agreement because two reasons. One, the first reason is that if they sign an agreement, they will get over $100 billion as a result of the annulment of the sanctions, economic sanctions. And second, an agreement will, to some extent, deny Israel legitimacy to strike militarily against Iranians' nuclear installations. I think that the Iranians have a great incentive to go and sign, and in the meantime, they try to get the best deal possible. They have time. In the meantime, they are progressing on the nuclear path, and they are not being stopped.
Our national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, many times already said that at a certain point of time, they crossing the certain criteria that after that crossing that point, it's not going to be feasible and profitable for United States to sign any agreement, because that period before, if, for example, if they want to leave the agreement, United States would like them to have like at least 1 year till development of nuclear weapon. But already now it's 6 months, according to most optimistic scenarios. And some people say 3 months already. So if they're going to continue develop whatever they're developing till this point, it's going to be no point for United States to sign an agreement, even.
Whatever the national security advisor says, he does not specify what is this point at which America will not continue negotiations. And despite Israel's pressure to define exactly this red line, the Americans refuse to do so. This is exactly the problem. And the Iranians, of course, understand it.
Okay. Then what do you think the best options for Israel right now in this particular situation, knowing that in interest of both countries, United States and Iran, is to sign the deal? What Israel should do in this particular point right now, like, after, of course, not when Biden is here, but when Biden leaves region, what are options right now? How can they speed up the process, or can they force United States, frankly, to set that line, to set that red line? Or can they provoke United States or coerce United States to do something that gonna destroy that paradigm that both of them are interested in signing? What Israel can do?
Obviously, Israel cannot force the United States to do anything. The United States is a big power, and Israel is a small nation. However, Israel should, in my view, try to attack the Iranian proxies in order, and the main reason is to limit the damage that will come to Israel in case it attacks the nuclear installations. And the second reason, which is not less important, is to convince the Arab partners that we have, particularly since the Abraham Accords, that we are serious about confronting Iran. If we do not confront Iran, I'm very much afraid that the Abraham Accords will collapse.
Then what, the number of proxies in the region, of Iranian proxies in the region, Hezbollah, you have pro-Iranian forces in Syria also, or you have Iranians in Syria, you have Houthis, you have in Iraq, you have certain militias, you have groups like PMU and like. Which proxy should be attacked in your opinion? I mean, which proxy? It's not a correct question. I'm sorry for that. Which proxy is preferable for Israel to attack?
I think we have to make sure that the tremendous threat coming now from Lebanon should be paralyzed.
So Hezbollah, you're saying?
Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles. Luckily for us, most of them are not very accurate. But this threat is a serious threat to the Israeli population, and it has to be eliminated. This is also a signal to our Arab partners that we are serious about confronting Iran.
So, if that logic going to be applied, then we can see, after the President of the United States is leaving the region, we can see serious conflagration on Israeli north border, especially considering that Syrian direction now is there are some obstacles from the side of Russia for Israel to continue doing what they were doing since 2015, right? If I understand you correctly.
I'm sure that we can still operate relatively freely in Syria against Iranian targets, but the main threat doesn't come from the achievements of Iran in Syria. They try to build bases there for launching missiles against Israel, but they are not that successful. And the main threat is still.
Do you think that invasion in this case, again, third one, is going to be possible, even probably fourth one, going to be a possible option in this undertaking? Because it's scary in a sense that we didn't have success. Israel didn't have clear success in 2006. And considering war of 1982, it's probably the first Israeli war that I saw as a kid and watching closely. And after that, all 18 years after that, it was not easy for Israelis. And we have seen the prime minister was elected, Ehud Barak, on the promise to take our boys out of Lebanon. So now, do you think that in this fourth invasion is going to be more successful because they have fortified positions, they have a lot of sympathy in South Lebanon, and the population is Shia also, and they supporting Hezbollah. So it's twofold question. First, do you think in Israeli officer corps, like top generals, they have appetite for invasion? And second, how successful can it be, considering previous history of Israeli Lebanon-Israeli-Hezbollah conflicts?
Obviously, we must do better than in the past. And although the past was not so terrible, after in 2006, we created a certain amount of deterrence, and we have quiet, more or less, along the northern border. But definitely, you are correct that Israel must prepare in a much more systematic way for this type of operation in Lebanon. To some extent, our chief of staff is speaking about attaining victory, and this is an encouraging sign. The Israeli forces are training. I'm in no position to assess if we'll be, more successful than in the past. I come from the land of prophets, but I'm not a prophet. And every war is risky, of course. But this is something we have to do. We live in a tough neighborhood, and this is what we must do.
Okay, that's military side of invasion. Now let's talk a little about consequences in case it happens of civilian infrastructure of the north, of people on Golan and people in Haifa. In 2006, they were suffering tremendously under shelling from Hezbollah and missiles attack from Hezbollah. And probably Hezbollah improved their missiles. And they now reach probably Tel Aviv. They now probably can reach Jerusalem. I don't know about Dimona. I don't know about that. It's deep south. But Gush Dan they can reach definitely. So what's logistical implications for service of interior? How can they do that logistically? How can they evacuate? Like we're talking millions of people. About 2-3 million of people should be evacuated from north and from center. How it's going? How can it be achieved? And Israel never had that in the past. Such an operation.
You are right, but our defense missiles have been improving over time. We have a good record, but to be honest, we all know that our defense missiles are primarily intended to protect our strategic installations, and we cannot protect all civilian population. And indeed, this is a scenario in which we will face civilian losses. This is why we should do it fast. We should do it fast in order to minimize the civilian losses. And I think that the government has a duty to explain to the population, to the Israeli citizens, the risks of such an operation and also the opportunities, why this should be pursued.
What government has the position of power to explain that? I mean, not be forced to resign like in next week or 2 weeks. You think Yair Lapid government has to be done constantly. The government, even if it's a caretaker government, has to take care of the country. That's a political suicide. Because we know that Israelis are not prepared to have losses. Remember when there was a costly operation that lasted for 34 days? They were saying that it was a very successful operation in Gaza because we lost only like 8 people or 9 people, something like that. But if we see the goals of that operation, there were no goals. Israel didn't achieve any of the target except for deterrence, which didn't work for long, because after that there was another shelling from Hamas, and it's round and round, and it's like it's a circle. So it happens like every year, almost every year. Israel has a confrontation with Hamas, with the missiles here, missiles there. So civilians go into shelters. It's not like that. That threat is still there, and it doesn't go anywhere. So now everybody was saying that, like, listen, let army win. Send troops there and do it like it's supposed to be done, but it's going to be losses. How big? experts were saying, and I think you subscribe to that opinion also, it's going to be huge losses. At least 1,000 soldiers can die if you're going to clean Gaza completely properly, in a proper way. And no government can do it, because when government do it, they're going to resign afterwards. Like after Yom Kippur War, Golda Meir resigned. I understand that that analogy it's not proper analogy, because that was a different kind of war. But still, Israelis are not prepared to have losses. And that's going to be...
I'm not sure that you are correct. I understand that the elite in Israel, political elite, and maybe even the military leadership is somewhat afraid of casualties. But I think that the population is ready for taking casualties if the war achieves its goals. Moreover, successful wars are popular.
But listen, in Lebanon in 2000, when Barak was running for prime ministership, the main slogan was, I will return our boys back. Didn't population understood in that particular time that our Israeli presence in South Lebanon is a guarantee that whatever is happening right now will never happen? And they were losing 6 soldiers a month. Am I correct? 6, something like that, right? Casualties were 6 soldiers a month in the last year.
No, there were less. About 40 people a year.
40 people a year. And still, sentiment was to return as soon as possible. Stop. Evacuate our army. Evacuate the soldiers back. Bring boys back from Lebanon. And we see it now, consequences of that decision in year 2000, as the same consequences of evacuation from Gaza and stuff. So they were not ready for loss of 40 soldiers a year. And now you're saying that the population will be ready for major military operation with like hundreds and hundreds of soldiers and probably thousands of civilians.
I think that the polls show that this fear is not warranted. The Israelis are ready for larger scale operations in Lebanon, also in the territories in Judea and Samaria, in order to make Israel safe. And this is, we published it on our website. Everybody can see it. We published serious work on the issue of sensitivity to casualties. It's a myth that Israelis are sensitive to casualties. They are sensitive to casualties when the wars are not successful. This is true, by the way, also of the Americans.
Sure. I think it's true with every single country. But in order for the war to be successful, it's got to be consistent, right? And goals should be clearly defined, and there should be no turning back before the goals are achieved. And with Israeli leadership for last, I would say 15 years, maybe 20 years, we didn't see that attitude. You agree?
This is what I'm trying to change in my country. And I think that there are ears that are willing to listen, even among the definitely professional staff and maybe even politicians.
So it looks like to you that there is no possible way for Israel in short-term perspective, to avoid military conflict. There is no way.
Right. There is no way to avoid military conflict in order to weaken Iran and eliminate the nuclear threat. And I wrote a piece. I wrote, to Natanz goes via Beirut.
That's, on one side I hear what you're saying, because that's the honest assessment of the situation. On the other hand, I understand, I realize, I just recently visited Israel in March, and I saw that country is, thanks God, blooming, it's developing, and it's I don't think people inside, they are prepared right now for a big military conflict. It's a hard thing. And I understand that everybody in Israel, they are served in the army, they either in the army or they're reservist, and Israeli society is militarized, I think, probably most militarized country in the world because of the situation in the region where they are right now. Still, it's hard for me to imagine because I never been witness of that inside Israel. When I was in Israel, I never seen the war. But I realize that's it's a perspective. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I have that feeling also. But tell me, do you think that when Israel invade, and definitely it's going to happen, I think also it's going to happen soon. Do you think that Arabs in the territories in Yehuda Shomron and in Gaza would not be like a fifth column in the back, like stabbing in the back when Israel going to do the work on up north?
This is definitely a possibility. We've seen it last year in May.
Right.
Not only the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza, also the Arabs within Israel.
Al-Fahm, right.
And we have to prepare for this contingency. And I think Israel is preparing, increasing the police force. It's trying to establish a national guard. We definitely have to take into consideration that there will be elements within the Arab Israeli population or beyond its borders that will try to capitalize on such a action, military action, Israeli military action, in order to cause trouble.
And you think there is a way that Israel can have a conflict on three fronts simultaneously and manage that?
We had it before, 67. Then it was even, we had armies against us, and we managed. It's a question of preparing for it, the military, and preparing mentally the population. No, it's nice to say, peace is around us, and we'll live well, and we'll prosper, but we have to be realistic. And sometimes I understand the rationale for delaying a war. But at the same time, if you delay a war, it may be more costly at a later stage than now.
Yeah, obviously. We see that in Gaza, and we see that in Lebanon right now. So we understand that. Right. So what do you think, before the commercial break, I want to ask you only that thing. What do you think about role of Fatah in Yehuda Shomron in this particular case? What's the scenario going to be of Mahmoud Abbas, for example, current Palestinian leadership? What they going to do in this situation? Will they try to cooperate with Israelis, or will they be against?
Well, I think that the current leadership is not very much liked by the Palestinians. It is weak. It lacks legitimacy. And we know that Abu Mazen is not a young person, and we'll probably see a succession struggle. Now, particularly when there is a succession struggle, people will be very careful in not cooperating with Israel, because if you cooperate with Israel, you lose popularity among the Palestinians.
You think they still have that kind of popularity that they can capitalize upon? Like, they were afraid to lose that already after everything, since 1993. I mean, they were basically puppet government, and they rightfully, that Arab population of Yehuda Shomron were always saying that you are puppets of Israelis, that because you are cooperate and your security is cooperating most of the time, except from 2000 to 2004. But most of the time they were working. That was the purpose of creation Palestinian authorities, I recall correctly, right? In order for Israel.
The Palestinian Authority is a source of employment. There are many people dependent.
1 million, right.
So they benefit from the existence of the Palestinian Authority. Also, the Palestinian Authority is able to secure funds from abroad. And this filters somewhat, to the people. Not all of it. We all know where most of it goes.
Right. We're going to make a short commercial break and come right back with focus on Tehran meeting next week, I hope. Thank you very much. Please stay with us, and we're going to be back very, very soon.
Бутик-политик. Сказал, как обрезал.
Добро пожаловать в Бутик-политик. С вами Кирилл Задов. У нас на связи профессор Efraim Inbar, профессор Болонского университета и президент Иерусалимского института стратегической безопасности. Professor, welcome on board again.
Right.
There is a meeting right now that, not right now, next week is going to be a meeting between President of Russia, President of Turkey, and President of Iran in Tehran, and they're going to be bilateral talks, and they're going to be talks on Syria. What do you think in this particular situation right now that Russia faces? Is Russia going to be more inclined to make deal with Iran? Because before that, Russia was not very happy about Iranian influence in Syria. They were trying to limit it also. Now, because West is not properly communicating to Russia, and not even that, they are supplying a lot of armament and weapons to Ukraine, making Russia suffer more casualties in the war, making the war more prolonged war. So in this particular case, and not even talking about sanctions and like all pressure that Russia right now faces, don't you think it's going to push Russia further to embrace Iran more and eventually limit Israeli scale of Israeli operations in Syria?
I'm not sure that the Russian calculus has changed vis-à-vis Syria. After all, they don't want their client Assad to be dependent upon Iran, and they've used Israel in order to limit the influence of Iran in Syria. They also don't want Iran to have greater influence and have greater a better position than Turkey. So I think they are quite happy with this type of arrangement in which the three countries are somehow controlling parts of Syria, and it seems that they are not changing their policy vis-à-vis Israel on this issue.
Okay, I understand that, but still they gotta give Iran something for cooperating with Russia and more actively. And I mean, if Russia goes east, who's on the east? China and Iran, nobody else, basically. So what Russia can give Iranians for that enhanced cooperation?
I think the Russians are paying for whatever they buy from Iran, be it
money,
UAVs, drones, and Russia is a big country that Iran is afraid of. It has been under occupation during World War II.
Right. They have reason to be afraid of. That's true.
And they are, of course, competing also with each other over Central Asia. So it's a very complicated, relationship.
Right.
And the Russians, after all, take care of themselves, and the Iranians, as well as the Russians, have a common goal: to weaken the United States.
That's true. And the last question probably for tonight. It's Idlib Turkish military presence. Don't you think that Iranians and Russians going to press Erdogan to leave Idlib and to regain, in order for Assad to regain total sovereignty over Syrian territory, Turkish troops should leave? Because now it's not failed state anymore. And basically, from international law point of view at least, Turkish military presence in Idlib is not guaranteed. I mean, it's not justified. I'm sorry, that's the proper word. And whatever right now is happening, Assad cannot be happy with that. So what do you think can they give Erdogan for this? If he's going to leave, they're going to give him green light for operation against Kurds on left bank of Efrat, or all my calculations are nothing, and it's not like that. It's not going to happen, and Erdogan will not leave Idlib.
I don't know what Erdogan will do vis-a-vis Idlib. If there will be great military pressure, of course he'll consider withdrawal, but he has freedom of action. The Americans are interested in a Turkish role in Syria because they see Syria as a Russian protectorate, and the Turks limit the power of the Russians. Also, again, there is a complex relationship with Iran on the Kurds. Neither country, nor Turkey, nor neither Iran wants the Kurds to be too strong, and of course not the Syrians. So what we see basically in the last years, and this is a result of the civil war, some kind of partition of Syria. Assad had 60% of Syria, and the rest are sharing it, and it's I don't see there will be a big change. The Turks are now also weaker than before because economic reasons are also isolated in the region, and this is why they are getting close to Israel, getting close to the United Arab Emirates. They get money from them. So there is a lot of fluidity in the situation, which allows for various initiatives
and maneuvers.
Local actors.
That's right. We have our time, unfortunately, come to an end. Thank you very much, Professor of Bar-Ilan University and President of Jerusalem Security.
No, I'm no longer at Bar-Ilan. I am the President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security.
That I'm saying also, yeah, because they didn't say it on the website, right? On the Jerusalem Post website. The last time I was checking, I was reading your article in Jerusalem Post. Thank you very much, President of Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, Professor Efraim Inbar. We have to continue our conversations next time possible. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Бутик Политик. Сказал, как обрезал.